Dale, and good morning to the members of the Commission, and let me thank each of you for what you do for Knox County. I know you make a lot of personal sacrifices in your role as public servants, and having been there for 8 years, I certainly appreciate what you do. First of all, let me clarify what my role is in this. I've had several questions about that. Lawyers are encouraged to provide pro bono services, and that's what I'm doing. I have been a long-time personal attorney for the Ragsdale family and also for Senator Tim Burchett. And in my capacity as their personal attorney, I have volunteered on a pro bono basis to give them advice from time to time on matters that may be of interest to them, and that is why I've been called in on this situation. The question that was asked of the governor and his staff recently that resulted in a February 8th letter, which I believe that most of you are familiar with, unfortunately did not frame the question correctly. If you'll read that letter carefully, you'll see in the first paragraph that they were responding to the question of whether a special election could be held to replace vacancies in county government. The answer to that is clearly no. And the reason for that is because the Constitution of the state of Tennessee in Article 2, Section 2, makes it clear that you folks have the power to appoint vacancy replacements. That's in the Constitution. No one can change that except through a constitutional amendment, and obviously there's not enough time to do that. The question, though, should be framed as follows. If you read Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, it says the county commission has the power to replace those vacancies, and those appointments shall hold office until the next election. And that is the key. What does the phrase, the next election, mean? In 1980, a Supreme Court decision in the state of Tennessee, McPherson versus Everett, was decided that dealt with that very question. In fact, it dealt with an elected official over in Davidson County who was appointed by the metropolitan government of Davidson County when a county official died in office. And that county tried to have a special election sooner than the next general election. And the question was brought up to the court. And the court very clearly stated in the 1980 opinion that the legislature has the power to determine when the next election occurs. And until they do so, in all likelihood, the next election is the next general election, which most of us are familiar with would be the 2008 election. But that decision, authored by Justice Henry, very clearly states that the legislature has the power to act, and when they act, they can define the next election under Article 2, Section 2, to be whatever they declare it to be. And it is under that limited window of opportunity that Mayor Ragsdale and Senator Burchett are asking for direction. Of course, wisely so, I think they put that question back to you. As the county legislative body, it's appropriate that you signify whether you would be interested in having that tool, if you will, in the toolbox. We believe, and I certainly believe, and that is the opinion request that Senator Burchett has authored dated February the 14th, which has been submitted to the Attorney General's office. We do not have the answer yet, but it is correctly framed, and we believe when the AG answers that opinion that it will say that indeed the legislature can define when the next election is for purposes of the terms that some of the 8 of you would serve until. Now that leads to a secondary question, and then I'll be quiet and let you ask questions, if you will. And that is, could the legislature, if it act, do so in a manner that is retroactive to you, the 8 of you that were recently appointed? We are not sure what the answer to that question is, but let me suggest 3 things to you on why it might be important to go ahead and ask the legislature to give you this tool in the toolbox. First of all, as you're aware of, there are 2 pending lawsuits that involve the appointment process. We don't know what the answer will be to those lawsuits, but there's a serious possibility that the answer will be that the appointments are voided. If so, that law, if it's passed, would not be a retroactive application. It would be in the toolbox for you to use, in which you could tell the public of Knox County that they could replace these appointed appointments sooner than later. There is also a possibility that the AG will say that they may retroactively apply. In 1996, the legislature eliminated the Public Service Commission. You may remember that. There were 3 elected public service commissioners at the time. We abridged or shortened their terms by act of the legislature, And the courts and the Attorney General ruled that that was legal. So we're not sure what the answer is. The third answer to that is some of you might choose to fall under that new law, even though the AG may say that it couldn't be applied retroactively. How would you do that? You could voluntarily resign and be reappointed and under the law. So there are several opportunities for us to come under the law if it indeed may be passed legally. That's why Senator Burchett and Mayor Ragsdale feel that it is a worthwhile effort. That's why they bring it to you today. I'll stop now at this point and try to answer any questions. And let me say I have great respect for your attorney, Mr. Owings, and for the State Attorney General. They're experts in this area. I certainly defer to their good judgment and would be glad to work with them on trying to work through any of this, which is a complicated situation.
Do we have any? Vice Chairman Strickland.
Attorney Gilbert, I don't usually say much on this body, but everything that you said sounded good. But in my opinion, the AG is what got us in this problem anyway. His opinion. You know, you brought us a lot of information, and I really need to think about it totally. Because it was his opinion that said that there was term limits didn't apply to county commissioners. So now I just need to do a lot of thorough.
I appreciate that, Commissioner. In fact, as you may know, I'm the one who asked for that Attorney General's opinion in 1995, and we do have a different Attorney General today. It's Bob Cooper, who's newly appointed, a very smart attorney, and you know, I read that opinion also in 1995. I was a sponsor of many term limit measures and believed in them quite thoroughly. But at the time, I read the opinion and thought it was a pretty well-written opinion. But I have to admit, the Supreme Court has the final say. Opinions are opinions. Attorneys will disagree sometimes on what the answers are.
Okay, let me say a couple of things. First, Mr. Gilbert, you addressed our county attorney is our attorney. He's not our attorney. He's everybody's attorney in county government. He represents the people of this county and legal affairs of this county. Secondly, one of the issues is in the Supreme Court. Do you agree or disagree? The Supreme Court gave us guidelines on how to replace the term-limited office holders.
It did.
By state statute of this body making the appointments. You agree? Disagree?
Well, I don't think that was the only remedies available, Mr. Chairman.
Well, it wasn't the only remedy, maybe, but what did the Supreme Court tell us to do?
It recognized that Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution gives you the authority to replace vacancies. No one disputes that.
Okay.
And the mayor does not either.
Okay. So we did that. If they would have thought that we went to the legislature or probably the Supreme Court by themselves could have said, hey, Knox County, you're going to have a special election in November. You think they could have done that?
No, the Supreme Court would never do that. The Supreme Court doesn't mandate those kind of things. It applies the law of the land as it exists. But that doesn't mean you have the right as citizens of Knox County and Tennessee to ask your legislative delegation to pass any law that you think is beneficial to the public. We do that every year. You pass resolutions all the time asking your legislature to pass bills. So if this body thinks it's important for the people to regain their trust in their government and to have an election sooner than later, and it's legally possible to do it, the question is, are you for it or against it?
I think I would be for whatever the law requires us to do.
Right.
If you go back and look at history, the Supreme Court, I believe, years ago used to be elected. Now they're appointed.
Right.
Some of the appellate courts, I think they're appointed now by the governor.
Yes, sir, but I'm not sure what this has to do with the question.
Well, what I'm saying is the people's rights were taken away, and I don't see Governor Bredesen or Governor Sundquist or anybody else when we have an appointment to an appellate court or the Supreme Court come here in Knox County and say, guys, what do you want me to do up here? And I don't believe they're probably quite as fair as Republican Democrats that we've been by working with this body and this government and totally trying to put back into places the Democrat Republicans to each office. I think we did the best we could. Now, in my mind, we had a couple of chances. We talked about this back a couple months ago when we talked about that commission. Phil Gouda and other commissioners talked about having a special election. I believe there's probably nobody on this body that wouldn't have wanted to have a special election. Sure would have took us out of the way, and we wouldn't have had all the conflicts that we've had. So where were you during that time, and how come you didn't ask the Attorney General